It was the middle of a cold winter night when everything went wrong. I had just finished my shift as an Uber driver, but one last ride request popped up, and despite the late hour, I couldn't resist. It wasn't busy that night, and I figured I'd take the ride to get a little extra cash. I checked the pickup location. It was a quiet, almost desolate area on the outskirts of the city. The address didn't seem familiar. It wasn't a neighborhood I usually drove through, but I didn't think much of it. I accepted the ride. When I pulled up to the address, the first thing I noticed was how silent everything was. No lights on in the houses, no movement, just the sound of the wind rustling the trees. I waited for a few minutes, expecting the passenger to show up, but there was nothing. Maybe I'd been too early. Then I saw him. A man standing by the edge of the street, almost blending into the shadows. He was tall, dressed in all black, with a hood up over his head. His face was obscured. The only thing visible were his eyes, which glowed slightly in the dim light. I unlocked the doors and waited as he approached the car. He didn't smile, didn't say a word. When he climbed into the back seat, I glanced at my phone. There was no destination listed. Just the message, drive. I started driving, trying to shake the unease creeping up my spine. It was just a ride, I told myself, but there was something about this man, something off. He didn't speak, didn't give any direction. He just stared out the window, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the seat. "Where to?" I asked after a while, breaking the silence. He didn't answer right away. I thought maybe he hadn't heard me, but then he turned his head slowly and his eyes locked onto mine. "You'll know when we get there," he said, his voice cold and hollow. I tried to keep my cool, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in some sort of danger. The quiet, the emptiness, the way he just stared at me. It was too eerie. I kept driving. The streets were getting darker and the houses were growing more spread out. The silence in the car was suffocating, and I couldn't help but notice the hairs standing up on the back of my neck. Then, without warning, the man spoke again. "You're wondering why you're here, aren't you?" I glanced in the rearview mirror, but all I could see was his shadow. I forced myself to focus on the road. "No," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Just another ride." He chuckled softly, but there was no warmth in the sound. "Liar." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my palms starting to sweat. The car's headlights cast long shadows across the empty streets, and it felt like I was driving deeper into a place where I shouldn't be. We passed a rundown warehouse district, the kind of place where you wouldn't want to stop after dark. The man seemed to be watching something in the distance, but I couldn't see what. "Turn left," he ordered suddenly. I blinked, my heart racing. "What?" "No, that's not the way." "Turn left," he repeated, more firmly this time. I hesitated, but the commanding tone in his voice made it impossible to ignore. Slowly, I turned the steering wheel, heading down an alley that didn't look like it led anywhere safe. "Stop here," he said, once we reached a dead end. I braked hard, my nerves on edge. The alley was narrow, the walls closing in around us. I looked at the man again, hoping for some kind of explanation, but he was staring straight ahead, unblinking. "You're not going to like what happens next," he said softly. Before I could react, the sound of a car engine revved behind me. A second car had pulled into the alley, its headlights blinding me. I couldn't make out the figures inside, but the distinct rumble of the engine told me this wasn't going to be a friendly encounter. I tried to back up, but the car was too close. I was trapped. The man in the back seat chuckled again, his voice low and unsettling. "You shouldn't have taken this ride." I quickly glanced around for an escape route, but there was none. The alley was too narrow. The second car was blocking the way out, and I didn't even want to think about what might happen if I got out of the car. Then, as if sensing my panic, the man reached forward and placed a hand on my shoulder. His touch was cold, like ice. "You'll be fine," he said, his voice calm. "Just follow my lead." The headlights from the second car grew closer, and I could hear the doors opening. The tension in the air was suffocating. I had to think fast. My eyes darted between the two cars. The man's eyes remained locked on me. I had no choice. I slammed the car into reverse and floored the gas. The tires screeched as I pushed the car backward, narrowly avoiding the other car. I sped down the alley, finally getting enough distance to pull back onto the main road. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights closing in. But there was nothing. No car behind me, no sign of the man. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest well-lit street. I pulled over and checked the back seat. He was gone, vanished into thin air. I sat there shaking, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But the strange thing was, the ride was still showing on my Uber app. It said I had completed the trip. It didn't make sense. The man was never even officially booked. I was supposed to be driving a passenger with a real name and destination, but there was nothing, no record, just an eerie emptiness. Subscribe to get more spine-chilling stories and follow my journey as I try to make sense of these terrifying encounters. Stay tuned for more. If you were in my shoes, would you have tried to escape sooner? Or would you have listened to the man? Let me know in the comments below.